This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. This is, what are we? I don't know. We're heading into hour 3 here, Brad, on this core episode about Maya Deren. We just got into the name. So fascinating stuff. I'm having a really great time. The one thing that I wanted you to hear, Brad, while you went up and did your business is I think in season 4, we really got to do a Freud Jung.
I think so. Yeah.
Pair
the
of
time
episodes.
Has come. Yeah.
I feel like there's
They're so influential. I mean, people will say, well, they're not really artists, but they're so influential on so many artists that
they count. They're easy subjects for Art of Darkness. And what Freud was doing was highly fabulistic, and Jung was simply sort of admitting it. And in any case, we'll get into it. Yeah. Cool.
So a couple other things under name. So we said the realm of illusion, also the mother of the Buddha, but we've also got meanings in Latin that are kind of large or great. Apparently, I don't know Latin. There's also a meaning in Hebrew of Maya, which is water. Also, Maya apparently was the mother of Hermes and the lover of Zeus. Right. So Alex Hamid had found this name Maya, and it was like, oh my God, it's hitting all these, like, it's so rich, right, with possible references. They're in New York, early to mid 40s, wartime in the 40s in Greenwich Village. And she very quickly, though she'd been there before and she'd made some friends, she's sort of doubling down on that, and she's becoming a big figure in this sort of the emigre artistic community, right? Everybody knows who Maya Deren is after a while. Again, she's wearing clothes she's made herself, but she's started to really adopt this European folk kind of look. And interestingly enough, she'd wear these like embroidered blouses that she would wear kind of off the shoulder, and she would wear what they call the dirndl skirt, and then big poofy hair. And this is this would eventually become like fashionable in the
Mm,
50s New York. It's like a
right.
proto flower child thing. And she's
Mm,
doing it in the 40s, right? So not to say that she was the influence on this, but it is interesting that her personal style was a precursor to what a lot of people were wearing a decade later, right?
mm,
It's kind of
right. Hmm.
kind of interesting sort of thing, right? She's basically a flower child in the 40s in appearance. Um, she would become good friends with Duchamp, who was much older than her, but they would become good friends. At the time they'd met, he'd supposedly given up on art in favor of chess. Uh, and he was past the urinal and all of those things is sort of the most provocative part of his career. But he was a sort of an he was weirdly enough an elder statesman of the avant-garde, right?
Where do you go from the urinal? You can't
Yeah, right.
top it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. I mean, you're basically saying like I don't even want to get too far into what Duchamp was trying to do, but there is an element of it that's sort of saying like there's nowhere else for art to go, kind of, right? Yeah. So then what do you do after that, right? You just go back to like oil, like watercolor painting. I don't know. Um, Now Maya and Duchamp had a few commonalities, but intellectually, where their real sort of the spark between them was they were both very suspicious of surrealism as a movement, of capital S surrealism. They both thought it was too inadequate and that it was sort of purposeless. They didn't think it really had they didn't really think it had guts to it. Um, they also both had similar ideas
Yeah,
about,
you could make the argument that surrealism was a bit of a wank.
yeah,
You see it sometimes and you go, okay,
yeah,
I see what you're doing here. It's a bit of a gimmick, bit of a shtick at times.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I
I
think,
admire it. I'm a
yeah,
bit of a philistine when it comes to fine art
sure,
and the visual arts, but but it's also like as a movement, there are going to be great pieces, and then there's just going to be like,
right.
okay, all right, this is a
Well, certainly, I'm sure they would have, even though they were suspicious, I'm sure they would have made a distinction between the sort of the great artworks of the genre and the lesser, right? I'm sure they would have
sure,
noticed the difference between those two. Um,
right,
uh, Now, this relationship with, oh, they also, Maya and he had very similar ideas about the relationship of between art and the commercial and just commerce, right? And she's really gonna, I think, understand this, and we're gonna understand this about her when we get to Haiti. But um, I mean, she's one of her famous quotes is Hollywood spend I make my movies for what Hollywood spends on lipstick, right? She was very much about
I
even the DIY thing.
love that. I That's
Yeah.
one thing I love about Werner Herzog. Not that
Hmm.
he's low budget per
Hmm.
se, but
Right.
that it's just so intense.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
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 I
Yeah.
love that philosophy of it.
The ethic is
Yeah.
just, yeah.
I
I'm all,
share that I share that philosophy in theater.
mhm.
Yeah, in any
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. No, there's a certain intensity and there's a certain, you know, we could talk for a long time about this, about like, how much we used to have a thing called selling out. And
Yes,
you
and it's
used to get scorned for selling out, and now nobody cares anymore.
I can't
And
remember the last time I've heard that phrase used. It would sound strange to accuse
mhm,
somebody of selling out now. It's so strange. I think we've all just accepted that the algorithm is so totalizing
yeah, what are you going to do?
that the best thing you can achieve is to kind of do that. Like we're
Right.
all already sold out to this machine. In a funny way, about the only way you can register is by being wiped out
Mhm,
from it, by being deplatformed. We talk about
mhm,
now.
mhm,
And
mhm.
hitherto, it would have been by selling out. You would have been platformed.
Right.
Now it's just the de facto water that we swim in.
Yeah, it's
Find us on
interesting.
YouTube, friends.
Yeah, that's right.
YouTube.com
Please,
slash at Art of Dark Pod. Yeah. I guess I'm
please.
selling out. Like, what does it
Sort
even
of.
mean?
I feel like
Yeah. It's
yeah,
strange, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
Very odd.
Well, there is an interesting thing that happens when we do. It feels like everybody has been. It feels like we've all been sold out, and so uh,
Bingo.
I at least better get paid, Like it's kind of
Right.
sucks. It kind of
Right.
sucks if I'm going to be sold out, but nobody ever pays
There are
me.
still figures who can kind of position themselves as anti-establishment in a way where if they did certain things, it would be a move. I'm not going to name names, but
Yeah.
in any
Yeah.
case, it's just not it's not part of that discourse kind of vanished with the advent of the internet, really.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
from the 90s.
Yeah.
That went away kind of at post Napster. I think like
Right.
Metallica, and I'm a Metallica fan, but I think Metallica were the last great sellouts. Like they were when selling out peaked.
Right.
There's nowhere to go from there anymore.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Even though, and again, I think Metallica, they're great, but
yeah, no, yeah, every creative person or entity, you face your own decisions, and I'm not,
but
positioning
we're probably
myself
dating ourselves a little bit here too, because
it's a Gen X ethic.
Gen X / millennials, like the cusp of it, like that. Yeah. This was a discussion. Yeah. Like if somebody judged that a band that you liked had sold out, it was like you took it personally.
No, if like Soundgarden showed up in a Nike commercial, it was like, whoa, what are you guys doing?
That's a great point. That's exactly it. Yeah.
They would lose credibility.
Yeah,
for sure. 100%. And now it'd be like nobody would care. It'd be like, oh, they did it.
You'd be like, good for them, or getting their money. Yeah.
And there's a sensibility to both of them. Whatever the case, Maya Deren would rather die than sell out. That's her vibe.
Cool.
So I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
I dig it.
I'm glad that somebody has that attitude. Maybe not everybody has to have it, but somebody's got it. I want to talk briefly about this film, Witch's Cradle, that's technically not finished, but I think it tells us how well she was positioned in the community. So she's working on this project that she didn't want Alex Hammond to be involved, right? She's become friends with Marcel Duchamp and Peggy Guggenheim, who's just opened this gallery called the Art of This Century Gallery, which was a big deal in the mid-40s.
Pollock was involved in that, wasn't he?
I'm not sure, because there's several different Guggenheim establishments, and I'm not sure who was involved in which one. I do think Pollock was involved in this one, but I think it was a little later than Maya Deren's involvement, maybe. But anyway, this is Greenwich Village. This is like we are artistes, right? This is like the hub of American avant-garde art, and Maya's right there. She's friends with Duchamp, right? So she decides she's going to make this next film in the gallery, in the Art of This Century Gallery. And because the gallery itself is kind of this art piece, right? This is when they started this thinking, maybe not started, but this is around the time they started thinking, well, maybe the gallery itself is an artistic object, right? And then you put other art pieces in as a complement to them. The film Witch's Cradle is not complete. There are some outtakes. I've watched the outtakes. They're interesting. It does seem like it's a little bit of just a tour around looking at different art objects. It feels a little derivative of some things Duchamp was doing at the time, but it's interesting. And it definitely tells you who Maya knew and what her context was at the time, right? There's this thing. It's so weird. The main character in Witch's Cradle is this woman who has basically a pentagram on her, drawn on her head, and in a circle around it, it's written, "The end is the beginning is the end is the beginning is the end is the beginning," right? And Maya was obsessed with this idea of ending on the same note you started with, and just what can you do, right? How can you make these things feel very cyclical? Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
very kind of au courant in a way.
Yeah. No, I'm finding myself this whole "the end is the beginning." I'm finding myself slightly influenced by it in my own work. I'm kind of thinking like, I should just keep that in mind while I'm working. Not that I'm going to try to do that necessarily, but there's some zhuzh there for sure.
Well, and there's a very famous formulaic way to write screenplays now that is, I don't know how fashionable it is even now, but the whole Save the Cat book, there's a structure where you want your opening image to somehow mirror your final image, either thematically or quite literally. You can notice it in cinema happening again and again.
Yeah, for sure. Couple other things that are in this film. There's an exposed human heart, which is sort of like almost like a special effect. There's a bunch of occult symbols and ritual
Mm,
kind of imagery.
mm,
Um, and then generally everything Maya does is she's trying to attain this sort of like not surrealism, but she is definitely going for that quality of the dreamlike, right? And so her
mm,
editing and her angles are all to be slightly disorienting. Um, she's she savors the ambiguous for sure. The next film she makes after that is actually a film she completed. It's the one that I kind of like the most out of her films. It's called At Land. It's two separate words, AT and land. I'm just gonna read you a bit um about this. So the girl in the film is a personage. So this starts out, well, hold on, I'll get there. She is the girl in the film is a personage. This is Maya Deren. She's again the star of her own film, right? And partially this is for artistic reasons, partially this is for budgetary reasons, right? She doesn't have to pay herself, right? She is this folkloric, mythological kind of figure. And the film starts, Maya is washed ashore on the beach, and the waves are actually, there's this cool part where she runs the footage of the waves in reverse, and it's a very, as they're kind of coming off of her sort of, and it feels like she's been like presented onto land by the ocean, right?
mm.
And it's interesting because Meshes in the Afternoon ends on she's throwing these mirror fragments into the ocean, right? Now she's being washed up onto the ocean. um then she climbs up in this very compellingly composed scene. She climbs up and she's looking very fit at this time. She climbs up onto this piece of driftwood. And as she climbs up to the top of the driftwood, she pulls herself over the top, and she's pulling herself over the top of a table where there's a dinner party happening. Right. So there's just this edit that's just like going into a different realm entirely. It's just a bunch of people sitting around a table enjoying themselves in a kind of a semi-formal environment. And then she crawls along the table. They don't notice her as she's crawling up the table. And then sometimes she's in trees. And then when she comes to the end of it, there's a chess game going on where she moves some of the pieces with her mind.
Fun.
It's
Interesting. I need
it's
to watch
wild.
this.
It's
At
pretty
Land.
wild.
Is it, what is it, 10, 15 minutes long?
It's on that range. It's a little shorter than Meshes of the Afternoon, I
Wow.
think. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little more ambitious because there's more people involved and more settings. But yeah, it's about the same. Then a piece falls off this chessboard that's at the dinner table, and then it falls down a gully and like where these like down a cliff basically. And then she's walking down this 2-track road, and then she's at this kind of cottage, and then she was walking down the 2-track road with this man, and they end up at a cottage. She follows him to a cottage. She crawls under the house and comes up into a space that is this very nice room somewhere else, right? So every time there's like a transition of environment, it's a completely different place. And this is one thing she thought was amazing about film, was you could do this with the edit. Sure, you can tell a continuous story with the edit, and there's been much ink spilled about how you use editing in storytelling for continuity and making sure that like you're transmitting certain for an audience, for a lay audience, very subtle indications about how to follow the action. For somebody who really knows film, it's obvious what's happening. And Maya is basically saying like, well, what happens when you radically displace what happens between cuts, right? And it's disorienting, but you also still follow it immediately somehow. Like the idea that when she's climbing up driftwood, and then the next it it cuts to her being at a dinner party, that your mind follows exactly what happened, even though it's completely discontinuous, right?
Right. Yeah,
She's
just
playing with
symbolic
those
juxtaposition and
concepts.
the language of cinema
Yeah,
and
yeah,
disrupting realism and
yeah,
reminding you that it's an illusion. Yeah.
yeah. And so this kind of continues through a sort of the sequence of things, and at some point she comes to a chess game being played, at the beach, at the beach, basically where she landed. Interestingly enough, I mean, it looks sort of like the chess game in Seventh Seal. Not exactly. I mean, it's not death playing, but there's a vibe, there's a similar composition.
Yeah, you can definitely
quality.
see that in the short film that we watched, Meshes of the Afternoon. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
influence of the Seventh Seal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this film again, it was sort of, it got some attention in the avant-garde circles. People were interested in it. They definitely thought she was up to something. Just a couple points about production. She made this near Port Jefferson, at Mount Misery Point on the northern coast of Long Island. They had to row out to it by boat, which I just think is interesting. Why didn't she could have found someplace else to shoot it, but that wasn't good enough for her.
I'm thinking about Virginia Woolf and The Waves for whatever reason.
Yeah.
When you describe this.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Maya's relationship with the water a little bit more. At Land took 6 months to make. It cost $415, which is about $7,000 in today's money.
Yeah, it's
right?
a
Pretty
little modest GoFundMe.
Yeah. And this is in talking about this film. There's this great quote from her that I'm gonna read. This is from Maya. Quote: "I was a poet before I was a filmmaker, and I was a very poor poet because I thought in terms of images. What existed as essentially a visual experience in my mind, poetry was an effort to put it into verbal terms. When I got a camera in my hand, it was like coming home. It was like doing what I always wanted to do without having to translate it into verbal terms." Right. So she's actually not, this part of the reason her films aren't narrative is she's not trying, she's trying to write poems with a camera is really what she's trying to do.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so you have to consider that it's not coming out of the theatrical tradition. It's something different, right? A lot of cinema up to that point was basically like, we're gonna film a play, and then it's gradually
more or less
from there, right? And so it's evolving from there as you learn the technology can do different things, and but for her, it's like, I'm going to write a poem with a camera. So it's
right. There's still whether or not cinema by the 40s had evolved past the purely theatrical, there was still a beginning, a middle, and an end. It still owes that dramatic, I guess, vernacular to older forms of storytelling.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And she says the end is the beginning is the end. She says something else.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all of a part.
Right. For her, beginning, middle, and end isn't as meaningful as some expressing some ever-present, not always becoming thing.
She's a vibe lord.
She is. Yeah, for sure. Now, here's another thing that gets really cool. She makes this film. She's got Meshes of the Afternoon. She's got At Land, and she's gradually accumulating these other films. She becomes... Okay, so Kevin, we think about, all right, nobody wants to watch these movies. How do I distribute these movies? How do I get people to see them? How do I get butts in the seats? How do I make any money at all from this? Well, I'm going to have to do it myself. Right. And so she does two things. She sort of adds to her repertoire two things. She becomes a published film theorist, and she becomes a very innovative film promoter. I want to talk about the theorist part sort of first. 1946, around the time that At Land comes out, same year that she wins the Cannes Grand Prix International, same year she gets the Guggenheim. She's not quite 30 years old. She puts out a book called a chapbook, really. It's a 50-page thing called An Anagram of Ideas on Art, Form, and Film. It's actually, I've read basically all of it. It's really interesting. So the setup is she has this grid. You have to imagine on the left, there is 1, 2, 3. 1 is the state of nature and character of man. 2 is the mechanics of nature and the methods of man. 3 is the instrument of discovery and the instrument of invention. And then there's a grid. That's the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is A, the nature of forms. B, the forms of art. C, the art of film. And every chapter is some connection of the horizontal and vertical of these. So there's 9
Wow.
sections,
This is
right?
very glass bead game. That's
Yes.
very interesting. Yeah, as soon as you start to begin making original diagrams and
Mhm.
riffing off them, you're ascending into some new realm of conceptual
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
that is generally pretty exciting.
Yeah. And as I'm reading this, like I said, I read pretty much all of it. A lot of it was, there's some of it that's a little, maybe it could be argued to be immature a little bit, a little intellectually immature, but a lot of it is really pretty interesting. I'm just going to read you a couple little snippets that I pulled out, just so you get a sense of what she's doing in 1946 while she's making these films. Okay, this is from an what was the title again? An anagram of ideas on art form and film. Quote, man's mind, his consciousness, is the greatest triumph of nature, the product of eons of evolutionary processes, of infinite mutations, of merciless elimination. Now in the 20th century, there are many among us who seek the long way back. And an essay on the relationship between art and the intellect, Charles Deutz has given his commentary on surrealism a profound humor by referring to it in the terminology drawn from the medieval period. Again, I'm just giving you snippets so you get a sense of what she's doing here. Here's another thing on modernity and creativity. Quote, creativity consists in a logical, imaginative extension of a known reality. The more limited the information, the more inevitable the necessity of its imaginative extension. The masks of primitive ritual extend the fierce grimace of the uncontrolled animal. The astronomical literary voyages of the 17th and 18th century extended the suggestions of the telescope. The contemporary quote unquote primitive may achieve some extraordinary effects by imaginatively extending some immediate simple knowledge. But imagine his embarrassment at suddenly confronting fields of knowledge whose real discoveries make redundant his extensions and are often even more astounding and miraculous. See if I can find another thing. Oh, she talks a lot in here about you'll like this, Kevin. She talks a lot on here about her issues with the documentary as form,
Hmm.
and what she resents about it, in short, is that the documentary pretends it's realistic.
Right.
That's like right. Her sort of beef is like, you guys, this isn't real. Like
Right.
you think it's real, but it's not real. And her
Yeah.
point is like, I'm more not to say that she was doing realistic, but she's like, I'm like, there's no pretension of me being realistic, but I'm not
Getting at a deeper capital T truth, or at
right.
least, right.
I'm not
Yeah.
pretending it's real, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This is why I admire Herzog's
Hmm.
documentary style so
Hmm.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. As
Um,
soon as you bring the camera onto a scene, it's no longer
yeah.
quote
It's
unquote
it's
real.
it's I
I
mean,
mean,
this is
yeah,
down into physics, right? As soon as you measure a thing,
yeah.
you
It's
change it, right?
Heisenberg. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So she was very, very aware of this. And this actually caused her issues when she's trying to make a documentary
I
about
like her even more now. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm on board. Mm.
yeah. I don't think I'll read too much more of that. Oh, there is one thing. This is interesting. This is about her talking. She refers kind of to Hollywood. Overall,
Mm.
this section is about form and realism and the documentary, but she gets into Hollywood, what's going on with Hollywood in this one section. Um, quote, I do not intend to minimize the importance of literature or drama or any of the art forms which film records, nor even to minimize the value of such records. On the contrary, just as I am deeply grateful to some documentaries for showing me a world which I may have been otherwise denied, so I am grateful to those films which make it possible for me to see plays which I could not have attended or the performances of actors now retired or dead. It's totally reasonable. The rapidity with which so many Hollywood films cease to make sense or carry emotional weight is an indication of their failure to create meaning in the direct visual terms of their own immediate frame of reference. The shorthand cliches which they employ to bridge back to the literary terms in which the film is actually conceived are drawn not from a recognized mythology, but from superficial mannerisms which are transitory and soon lose their referential value. If the great works of art have succeeded in retaining their value even long after their symbols have lost their referential powers, precisely because their meaning was not entrusted in the first place to the frail bridges of the symbolic reference. Right? And then I'm giving one more para and then we'll move on. It is also a common belief that when a literary work contains many quote unquote images, it is especially well suited to being filmed. On the contrary, the better the writer, the more verbal his images, in the sense that the impact derives not from the object or events described, but from the verbal manner of their description. I take at random the opening paragraph of The Trial by Franz Kafka. Right. And then she starts to basically talk about the sort of cinematic value of the trial, but also where cinema can't quite do what the trial does, right? Not in a way of saying literature's better, but trying to understand the distinctions of the form of cinema. And what she's doing partially here is sort of formalizing ideas that she's not the only person to have them, but really we're talking about film's been around for a while by 1940, but it's still relatively young, right? The generation of filmmakers who made the first films are still alive. And I think what she's partially trying to do is come up with what are the tenets of film itself as an art form, not film as a way to make books so you can see them, and not film as a way to turn plays, but actual film as its own art form on its own. What is it trying to do, and what is it doing at its best?
Yeah. So not too much of a deep thinker here. It's just sort of real surface level.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. 30 years, right? And she's 30 years old, right? And she's
just want to kind of just chill out. No, don't actually. I really admire this. I'm being
she's kind of I mean, she's pretty awesome.
Yeah. This is how she's already won a Guggenheim at this point for making film. Now
this is right around the time she does anyway. Yep.
Right. Really interrogating the form.
Yeah, she wanted to know, how does this thing work, right? It wasn't going to be enough to just point a camera at an interesting thing. You needed to know what made it mean something, right? Now, the other thing I said she did, she became a film theorist and a film promoter in addition to being a filmmaker. She does something pretty friggin' cool. In 1946, she books the Provincetown Playhouse in Greenwich Village. This is an old school theater where Eugene O'Neill worked, and E.E. Cummings had a play stage. It was not the centerpiece, but it was a major avant-garde, not even avant-garde, indie. It was an institution. It was a theatrical institution in Greenwich Village in the 40s. She showed the first film apparently ever shown in the Provincetown Playhouse was Meshes of the Afternoon. And she took 3 of her films, Atland, Meshes of the Afternoon, and another one we haven't talked about, A Study of Choreography. And she bundled them together, had a prepared lecture that kind of wove them together, and put it under a program titled 3 Abandoned Films, from Valeray's notion that a work of art is never finished, it is only abandoned. And she sold out the Provincetown Playhouse for this event.
Right.
It's cool. Badass.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Right. It's like, I make these crazy art films and no one's ever going to pay for them. You know what?
Right.
I bet they will pay for them.
Every second person there is a heavy too, or third person is a heavy.
Yeah. Now, exactly. And this is how big of a hit it was. This is the effect that this had on film history. This guy, Amos Vogel, sees this, goes to it, and is like, I can't believe what she's doing. This is incredible. And he decides he's going to start this thing called Cinema 16. And Cinema 16 it's sort of a film society. And there are, over the course of between 1947 and 1963, they end up showing a bunch of people's films, some of them giving them the first airing. They would show films by Roman Polanski, John Cassavetes, Stan Brakhage, who we're going to talk about later, to show films by Kenneth Anger. This was like a real opportunity for people who were making films, avant-garde films, to present them to an audience, right? It was in Cinema 16. Now, in 1963, Cinema 16 went by the wayside, and that's because Amos Vogel founded, with a couple other people, the New York Film Festival, right? Which is going on to this day as one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world. And Amos Vogel basically got there because he was inspired by what Maya Deren was doing at the Provincetown Playhouse.
Yeah,
right?
that rocks. I like that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Really cool. So let me give you a quote from, I'm going to put my monocle on, give you a quote from the New Yorker article.
Oh no, I just did this. So there are like a million. You could just screen grab this on YouTube. I'm not. Well, right? Yeah. Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah. That should be just a red eye. You put that on and that eye becomes red.
Right. Yeah, I might get a monocle. It's too
quote
funny.
Unquote, by achieving worldwide recognition for films that she made on her own with family and friends on trivial budgets, Deren spurred generations of experimental filmmakers to follow in her footsteps. Their films then found a home in institutions that she'd helped bring to life. As for the specific influence of Deren's artistry, it radiated outward in many directions and inspired a wide range of avant-garde filmmakers such as Shirley Clarke, Yvonne Rainier, Janis Makis, and Barbara Hammer. These are people in the avant-garde cinema world. I'm not super familiar with their work, but these are heavies in that world. The most conspicuous and perhaps most significant adaptation of Deren's far-rangingly associative yet meticulous composed fantasies may well be in the movies of David Lynch. As we mentioned earlier, David Lynch has acknowledged Meshes of the Afternoon as being a big influence. Okay, so Maya, after doing this thing in 1946, and as she's starting to get this attention from Cannes and the Guggenheim stuff is happening, she goes from being a player in the scene to briefly being the scene in Greenwich Village. She is, they end up being sort of friends with everybody, and there's a whole bunch of names you could give. I want to give you a couple anecdotes from this time. One is from this guy, Graham Ferguson. He's a guy who co-invented IMAX film technology, and he was good friends with her. And this is him talking about Maya. Quote, "She came from the sea. She saw herself as a sea creature. Her bedroom was like a grotto under the sea, and it was full of many beautiful objects, shells, coral, and on the ceiling there was a very large, unusual painting of underwater creatures. In normal light, you would see that. When the lights were turned out, it turned out that it was painted with phosphorescent paint, and so suddenly it came to life with different colors. You really felt like you were undersea at night." Right? So she's really occupying this like aesthetic art. She's the artiste, right? So every aspect of her life has to be artistic. She's making her own clothes. She's making these films, and then she's telling you why they're so good, right? And then she's completely sort of self-created creature at this point.
Yeah, right.
There's a newspaper article about a party she has, right? I think I don't know if this was the New York Times or like, it might have been like the Village Voice. Quote, "A couple Saturdays ago, villager Maya Deren, an author, lecturer, voodoo expert, and maker of avant-garde movies, threw a party for some 30 friends, artists, writers, dancers. There was impromptu music by flute, bongo, drum, guitar, and piano, excellent grub, much conviviality. Artist Roy Colonna was among the company, and here are a few of his impressions of a typical village artist party." And then there's some drawings, which I can't obviously show you, some entertaining sort of cartoon-like drawings of this party. Now, so she would host these parties, and again, like I said, she was the scene for a little while. The trick for her, though, was it required a bit of energy, as you might imagine, to be Maya Deren after a while, right? You got to make the films. You got to do the lectures. You got to make the clothes. You got to make your bedroom a grotto. You got to like, you know what I mean? And
right. And New York is already a frenetic town. Right. There's a lot. It's hard to ever really feel like you're getting any R&R in New York City.
Right.
I can tell you from experience. You got to go out of your way you got to get out of town.
To actually relax. Chill out for a second. Yeah. Right. Now, so associated with this, at some point along comes Max Jacobson, better known as Dr. Feelgood. Now, Dr. Feelgood, as we talked about in the Anais Nin episode, was the guy who was basically responsible for feeding all of the famous people,
There are
including the Kennedys.
only
Yeah,
25,000 people
yeah.
alive at a given time.
Right.
It's the theme
So
of the pod.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. So Maya had started doing Benzedrine when she was touring with Catherine Dunham to keep up. It's not clear how addicted she was, but sometime in the 40s, possibly as early as 1943, she started getting the quote unquote vitamin shots from Dr. Max Jacobson. Now, we could go in depth here. It might be interesting at some point to do a Max Jacobson episode where you just like we did Chelsea Hotel. It's just like all the different people that
All the
Max
people he
Jacobson.
treated. That is a
Yeah.
great idea. That might be a Patreon special. We'll
Yeah.
figure that out. But
Yeah, we'll
just
think
like
about that.
like a 90-minute Dr. Feelgood episode would be very cool.
Yeah, it would be kind of cool, right? Whatever the case, let me read you this quick thing. Again, I'm going to put my monocle on from the New Yorker article on Max Jacobson. Okay. Quote, Jacobson, born in 1900, studied medicine in Berlin and fled Nazi Germany in 1936. He had a lifelong interest in treating multiple sclerosis, but he made his name developing booster shots for healthy patients, first among other European emigres, then in New York's theatrical community, and eventually in Hollywood and Washington. Sloshing and mixing amphetamines, vitamins, enzymes, tranquilizers, placenta, and anything else that inspired him into what he called an IV special. The charismatic Jacobson came up with concoctions to pump up stressed out celebrities. Otto Preminger, Truman Capote, Tennessee Williams, Alan J. Lerner, Eddie Fisher, Anthony Quinn, they all saw him. Dr. Max Jacobson's devotees came to his practice throughout the day and night, sometimes mistakenly breaking into nearby offices to search for drugs. And he not only shot them up, he taught them how to inject themselves and prescribed them needles. Maybe they will destroy me, but they make me see life in a good way, Lerner told his wife about Jacobson's treatments, according to testimony. Right.
And this goes on to this day, of course.
Yeah.
Million different things this even now.
Adderall, modafinil, everything else, right?
Oh,
now,
God.
by the 1960s, just a quick, because this is the Max Jacobson story is too good to just gloss over entirely. By the 1960s, Max Jacobson is shooting up the Kennedys, Jacqueline and John F. Kennedy, right? He traveled to, I didn't know this, he traveled to Vienna with JFK to shoot him up right before a summit meeting with Khrushchev, right? So it's like he's in the halls of power by the 1960s. And in the 1940s, he's kind of hanging out with like the theatrical community and Anaïs Nin's friends and all of that. And Deren gets hooked up with him and gets shots. Now, it's tricky because to get shots from Jacobson, it's not the same as like going to a drug dealer and like, I know I'm buying like street drugs. He's a doctor and all your friends do it. And you know what I mean? And so it's weird to like, did Maya Deren do drugs? Yes. Was she like a druggie? It seemed like she was using it for like motive, like
get up and go
power. Yeah. And so but she was definitely doing it, and she was doing it for a long time, right?
Yeah.
New
York City is
in this book, this Divine Horseman book, she thanks Mac Jacobson in the introduction for his quote unquote creative medicine.
I dig it. Yeah, New York is a booze and uppers town, man.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, New York is not a psychedelic town. Although increasingly, apparently, people smoke weed. I guess you can come down, but I don't know. I'll always associate New York City with booze and other stuff that keeps you awake.
I was in New York City recently, and I have to say, on the street, I don't think there was any point at which I couldn't smell weed.
Yeah. That's been a big change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very curious.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it'll calm everybody down.
Maybe
chill out. Yeah, it might
down,
take the edge out, edge off a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll talk about another film that Maya made. This also was finished in 1946. This was called Ritual in Transfigured Time. Let's kind of read this a little bit here. In this film, Rita Christiani, an African-American dancer from Trinidad, she's in this film. There's sort of this distinctive camera stops. There's a lot of dancing. It's very dance heavy. Maya was very interested in dance and trying to actually capture dance on film, which, I think a lot of people think, no, you just point the camera at it. And to her, that's not quite right. You're trying to capture the dynamism of it. Yeah.
Well, and we're getting ahead of things here, but of course, we're doing another female filmmaker later this year in Leni Riefenstahl. And Leni would have been similar in terms of sport. She influenced everyone that came after in terms of the Olympics. To this day, are in the way they're shot. It goes all the way back to that.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. That's the thing is right now we feel like some of this stuff is obvious, like when it comes to like how something is presented to you on video, but it's like people had to figure out how to shoot these things so they made sense to you. It wasn't obvious right from the beginning, the first time somebody had a camera in their hand.
Well, right? and they're still innovating with it too. Like the NFL now has these like those cameras that fly down over the field and all of it. Paulia talks about how the any given Sunday, just a typical NFL game is an all-time great achievement of cinema every single time. And she's totally right.
Yeah.
It's this incredible spectacle every time.
It really is. And the way they're able to like hold together a narrative and, it is actually, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's very true.
And we're 7 minutes into kickoff on Super Bowl Sunday, and Brad and I are talking about the experimental film. I'm starting to twitch a little here. I'm starting because people are starting to talk about the game, Brad. People are starting to talk. No, you take all the time you need.
Okay, good.
I got Hulu. I can rewind. I don't actually care that much about the outcome. However, go Birds.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even
Philly's a great sports town. I just think give it to Philly. Yeah.
Okay.
I have no skin in the game. No skin in the game.
Yeah. Okay. So Ritual and Transfigured Time. I'm going to give you, this is just the Wikipedia description because I don't want to spend, I don't want to spend too much time on any one film, right? But I do want to make sure we're talking about them and you got a sense of what they're about. So this is just from Wikipedia on Ritual and Transfigured Time. Quote, Maya Deren's character sits in a room with string wrapped around her hands in a manner reminiscent of a cat's cradle. String was a very big image for her, and mirrors as well. Rita Christiani is drawn to Deren and begins winding the string into a ball. Close-up and slow motion highlight the intense feeling on Deren's face as she talks and moves her hands up and down, performing the first of the rituals in the film. Anna S. Nin looks upon the scene scornfully. Christiani finishes winding the string. Deren disappears, and Christiani walks to the doorway Nin is standing in. Christiani is now wearing a black outfit with a veil and a cross necklace. A room full of people interact through expressive, dance-like movements. As they approach Christiani, she avoids them with graceful movements. Many shots and actions are repeated as she makes her way across the room. She looks around intently to find someone and spots this man, Frank Westbrook. The two meet, and he almost kisses her on the cheek. Westbrook and Christiani dance together outdoors. He begins to dance with some other women, and she leaves, looking back over her shoulder several times. One of these times, she is replaced by Deren, right? So there's these figures replacing each other and this doubling, right? Christiani comes upon Westbrook posing atop a pedestal as a statue. She approaches, he moves, and she takes a step back. He moves again, and she runs away. Westbrook slowly chases after her in long, leaping strides. He's quite a dancer, this Westbrook guy. I watched this film. He's very well built and very lithe and very, very dancerly. He catches her. Deren runs underneath a pier into the ocean. She wades further and further into the water. The film switches to a negative image as she sinks down into the water. Christiani lifts the black mourning veil she was wearing at the party, but since it is a negative image, it looks like a white bridal veil. Right, so, yeah, and here's a quote from Maya about this, and then we'll move on. A quote from Maya about this film. A ritual is an action distinguished from all others in that it seeks the realization of its purpose through the exercise of form. In this sense, ritual is art. And even historically, all art derives from ritual. In ritual, the form itself is the meaning. More specifically, the quality of movement is not merely a decorative factor. It is the meaning itself of the movement. In this sense, this film is a dance. So, kind of just interesting. Some Maya's sort of takes on her understanding of what she's doing and her theories on art more generally.
this is a woman who's packing more ideas into a 15-minute film than most will put into a feature.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
that's fine. Like there's room for the romantic comedy feature with the big names. And maybe we pull a few little tricks from Maya's kit, but she's just jamming each of these little movies into, or all these ideas, just full of ideas.
Absolutely. Now, as we said, 1946, Deren is awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for creative work in the field of motion pictures. The idea is the funds are to continue her filmmaking. She doesn't tell them that at this time she's planning already to head to Haiti. Nonetheless, this is what she does. The initial idea is that she knows she's learned how to film dance. She's going to go there and she's going to film voodoo rituals using her idea of how she's learned how to film dance. She kind of gets into this because of her interactions with Katherine Dunham when she worked for Katherine Dunham, the matriarch of Black dance, and a man named Gregory Bateson, who's a famed anthropologist. Now, Gregory Bateson, this is an interesting another little connection. Gregory Bateson's about 13 years older than Maya. He's, like I said, he's this renowned anthropologist, or who would become one, a semiotician and a cyberneticist, who would co-develop the double-bind theory of schizophrenia, and who was one of the original members of the Macy conferences. Kevin, do you know anything about the Macy conferences?
Not a thing.
No. Okay. So there are these conferences that ran in New York from 1941 to 1960. And the idea was to promote meaningful communication across scientific disciplines. The guy who founded it, Josiah Macy, had a real penchant for cybernetics. I mean, again, this is 1940s, right? So these conferences spun off into organized studies, the first organized studies in cybernetics, and what would eventually become known, cybernetic systems theory, and what would eventually become known as cognitive science. So out of the Macy's conference, you get what we know as cognitive science, fundamentally. And so anyway, this guy is, and this is interesting. Here's some subjects of the Macy conferences around the time that Maya would have known Gregory Bateson, who was a founding member. And she had a romantic relationship with him as well. In 1946, in March of 1946, the Macy conferences were about self-regulating mechanisms, simulated neural networks, anthropology, and how computers might learn how to learn. This is 1946, right? Object perceptions, feedback mechanisms, perceptual differences due to brain damage, and deriving ethics from science. In 1946, the conference talked about concepts from Gestalt psychology and tactile communications among ant soldiers. And then in 1947, they were talking about child psychology. So there is some, and it was heavies like that were attending this. If you look at the people who founded it, it is Blue Link, Blue Link, Blue Link, Blue Link. Right. And when you say the word cybernetics, I have a certain thought in my mind that has it just my pleb peasant brain just goes to like robots. Right. But it's like if you Google what it is, it's not that. No, it's not. It's about machine learning, but also life forms. It's also about like decentralized control. Like there's a lot going on. Cybernetics there's a lot happening in there, and it's more that like computer science is a subset of cybernetics rather than
It's about circular causal processes such as feedback. Right. Okay. The cybernetics wiki page is like, whoa, this is a whole world I've never thought of.
No, and these Macy conferences, these guys were like inventing artificial intelligence on paper before technology was available to do any of it. Right. Yeah. Like it was
pretty
all
incredible.
Theoretical. Yeah. So this Gregory Bateson guy's involved in this. He's also an anthropologist. Again, there was a little bit of a romantic relationship. It's not clear. I couldn't find out exactly what happened, but whatever the case, by the end of 1947, Maya was no longer with Alex Hamid. They were divorced, and she was no longer with Gregory Bateson. She's a free woman out on her own once again. Now, she's going down to Haiti, which is an auspicious. I mean, who goes to Haiti? You know what I mean? It's an intense thing to do. Just sort of.
It really is.
Yeah.
Missionaries.
And some people do
business people.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
she goes the first time she goes, she's there for 18 months.
Whoa.
Um, let's see, I'm gonna read you this bit from her book.
Whoa. 18 months.
Yeah, first
I
time
was
she
thinking
goes.
like she might go down for a couple of weeks, then go down and shoot for a month or something. Wow. No, she
She
moved
is
down there.
for real. Yeah.
Whoa.
This is the thing. This is the thing about Maya Deren. Whatever you think of these movies, you might watch Meshes of the Afternoon and go, I don't know. Maya Deren was for real. Okay, let me read you this part from this great book, Divine Horsemen, The Living Gods of Haiti. Uh, quote, in September 1947, I disembarked in Haiti for an 18-month stay with 18 motley pieces of luggage. 7 of these consisted of 16mm motion picture equipment, of which 3 were related to sound recording for a film and 3 contained equipment for still photography. Among my papers, I carried a certificate of a John Simon Guggenheim Fellowship for, quote, creative work in the field of motion pictures, as distinguished from documentary film projects, which was a reward for the stubborn effort that had been involved in creating, producing, and successfully distributing 4 previous films with purely private and limited means in the face of a cinema tradition completely dominated by the commercial film industry on the one hand and the documentary film on the other. Also among my papers was a carefully conceived plan for a film in which Haitian dance, as purely a dance form, would be combined in montage principle with various non-Haitian elements. I recite all of these facts because they're evidence of a concrete, defined film project undertaken by one who is acknowledged as a resolute and even stubbornly willful individual. She's laying all this out because she's trying to tell you, like, look, I had a plan. I didn't intend to become a voodoo priestess, right? That's not what I thought was going to happen, right?
Whoa.
Okay, so she ends up with thousands, I think 18,000 feet of footage, right? And at some point she ends up with this book. And well, let's explain a little bit about briefly. We're gonna talk more about the Haiti and the voodoo stuff in the After Dark, but we gotta cover a little bit of it here. There is a little bit about. So it's interesting. So when I cracked this open and start to read it, I read the editor's foreword, and then I came to the end of it, the editor's foreword, and I was like, "This is a really interesting and well-written foreword." And then it says JC. I was like, "Well, who's JC? Who wrote this thing?" I look it up. Joseph Campbell wrote the foreword to this book.
Oh, okay.
Maya Deren was friends with Joseph Campbell. They were homies.
Okay.
And he asked her to write this book.
And as we know, Joseph Campbell had little to no influence on the history of cinema.
Right. Yeah, nobody, a name that nobody ever mentions anymore.
Bum, bum,
Right?
bum, 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 yeah.
He was actually, after Hero of a Thousand Faces, he wanted to do a series of books, and there was going to be too much for him to write, but a series of like books, each one of them was going to be more detailed about a world religion. And I think this was either Maya's book was either the first or second book in that series, right? And so he had asked her to write it, because they'd had some conversations after she'd been there, and he was like, "Oh, like, I haven't talked to anybody who understands voodoo, and you seem to understand it." Yeah. So let me read actually this little bit that he wrote in this book, from the foreword. Quote, and this is Joseph Campbell again. Quote, Maya Deren's definition of myth as the facts of the mind made manifest in a fiction of matter is the key to both the psychological interest and the moral relevance of her richly informed anthropology. It was just after I had completed work on The Hero with a Thousand Faces that I met Miss Deren, fresh back from her first season in Haiti, and it was exactly her perception of the facts of the mind, which are substratal to all productions of the human imagination, and the colorful local matter of the fictions, and fictions is in quotes, of Haitian voodoo that immediately struck me with wonder and delight. There's this thing. So there's this Haitian proverb that Maya is trying to go around. And the proverb is, when the anthropologist arrives, the gods depart. And so the idea is that, yeah.
That's the same principle that we talked about earlier. That's the same Heisenberg As soon as the camera's on,
Mhm.
something gives.
Right.
Yeah,
And so
interesting.
Maya needs to figure out how is she going to get past that. And the only way to get past it is to do it. You can't sit on the sidelines and just point a camera at it.
Gonzo cinema.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, Now this book will come out in 1940 or sorry 1953. It's based on her experiences between 1947 and 1951. She would continue to travel to Haiti until 1955. In that time period, she would spend a total of 2 years there altogether, right? Over the course of 8. So, over the course of 8 years, a quarter of her time she spends in Haiti, mostly in the Vodou community. And as we're going to learn more in the After Dark, the voodoo community is a fringe community in Haiti. A lot of people sort of believe it, or they have a grandmother who believes it or something. But if you're in Port-au-Prince, in the center of civilization in Haiti, you're probably not a voodoo practitioner, at least not publicly one, right? So you're in Haiti. Maya's in Haiti, but then she's also in like out in the countryside with these people doing these rituals and these practices. Um, uh, this is something that her interpreter. So in the documentary In the Mirror with Maya Deren, they go back to Haiti to the community that she was in. They talk to people about, people who may have known her, and they talk to her interpreter. This is what her interpreter had to say. Yes, Maya served here. She was initiated for all the Loas. And the Loas are basically the gods or the spirits or the entities or the angels or the demons, depending on how you want to define these things. She, Maya, got a guardian spirit. She became Kanzo, that is initiated by fire, and then she became very strong. Everywhere she went, she could work. All right, so
Whoa.
yeah,
What?
Kanzo. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's so
Cool.
cool, right?
From socialist apparatchik
Mhm.
to voodoo priestess in Haiti
Yeah,
with a Guggenheim fellow in fellowship in between.
yeah.
That is intense.
Right, isn't it? It's so cool. All right. Now, one thing about the voodoo, there's different ways to pronounce this. Voodoo, which I have a hard time saying that for some reason. Voodoo, I think, is probably the appropriate way to say it. But in New Orleans, to my understanding, it's pronounced voodoo. So I'm just going to be using these terms sort of interchangeably. Um, uh, I do want to talk a little bit more about the film she attempted to make. It did come out, I believe, it came out after her death. Footage of hers was arranged with voiceover readings from this book. That's how it worked. So it's not really a Maya Deren film, though she did shoot the footage, if that makes sense. Um, it would be completed by her third and final husband, Tieji Ito, and we're going to talk more about him in a little bit. Okay, so she goes down to Haiti. She's got all this ambition, all this energy, just like she always had. And like we'd said, and I'm trying to point out, she's known for her sort of organizational fervor, right? Her ability to make things happen. Now she's had some unfinished films, but she's that's mostly because her ambition is bigger than the capacity of any one person in some ways. Um, she's able to leverage favors and information from all these people, not only Catherine Dunham and Gregory Bateson, as we talked about, but she read all of the work of William Saybrook, the guy who she was an assistant of, who'd also been to Haiti. She talked to Joseph Campbell. She also became friends with Margaret Mead, the famous American anthropologist Margaret Mead. She also was very good at ingratiating herself to the locals. So they just liked her, apparently, right? There's a bunch of people when they went back in this documentary. There's a number of people who remembered her very fondly.
And did
Um,
she have no attachment to Judaism per se? She wasn't synagogue. She was just like a fully secularized. So for her, the voodoo
yeah,
just comes in. There's
yeah, I think
no.
right. I
Mm,
think when she hits this, she's a full-on atheist. Like
mm.
I think
It's almost
I
like
don't think.
cinema is her religion in a way.
Yeah, no,
Art has
I think
become
that's
her.
very true. Right,
Yeah.
right. And again, she didn't go into this because she thought she thought there was something to the voodoo religion. She thought that the ritual was had retained some of this like primal nature that had been lost, just as a ritual, right? And that she might be able to actually capture something that was still vital if she went down and tried to capture it as a dance, as
Sounds
a ritual
like
itself, right?
she did. Yeah.
She did. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, and so now a whole bunch of what comes out of this is interesting. So the film in her time doesn't come out, but a bunch of other stuff comes out. This book comes out, right? She releases two records of Haitian ritual music that are, one's quite interesting. It's hard to say that it's not like good listening to drive around to, right? You don't put it on and be like, oh yeah, it's a jam. But like it's got something going on. It's got an energy to it that at times is sort of haunting, and at other times is quite intense.
Are these on Spotify or Spotify? Yeah.
You could look them up on YouTube.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Cool.
one's called Divine. If you look up Divine Horseman LP, Maya
Mm.
Deren, you'll get it.
Pretty sure Spotify is still our number one channel. So
Is that
thank
right?
you for, I think
Thank you.
so. I thank you for
Yeah,
listening on Spotify.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Appreciate it.
Spotify is the user interface that's the most appealing, isn't it?
Yeah, I really do.
I
I think
think.
they do a fine job presenting the podcast. If you're not
Mhm.
listening to it through the website at artofdarkpod.com, I believe Spotify has yes, I know for a fact Spotify has the feed of all the great show art,
Mhm.
principally from friend of the show, Peniel Colada,
Yes.
who does these incredible psychedelic portraits of all the core subjects that we cover. So if you
Mhm.
haven't seen it yet on Spotify, check it out. It's also
Yes.
the greatest word for an American to attempt to pronounce in a fake British accent
Yeah.
is forever that word. It's so
Yes.
fun.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spotify and what about?
Spotify.
Yeah.
What about? Wonderful. And we love our British listeners
Oh
too.
yes,
Hello.
it's a
How y'all
friendly
doing
jive.
on the other side of the
Yeah.
pond?
Yeah.
We also got I got a plug. We got
Yep.
exact details not quite yet, but Art of Darkness Live, it's coming. St. Paul, Minnesota, Fitzgerald Part 1,
Yeah.
June. Keep a lookout on the website. We're going to start promoting that soon. Going to be a very intimate affair. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's gonna be. I'm really looking forward to that.
I might have to get my monocle in ahead of that. We'll see.
Well, if there's any New Yorker passages we're gonna read, we definitely are gonna need a
Indeed,
monocle.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Brad, by the way, we're going into hour 4. We're
Yep.
coming to the end of 3 hours here.
Yeah.
You're doing
and we're well
bang up.
into it. We're getting.
Yeah. I could feel you bringing us home here. I'm really
Mhm.
excited. Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod for the After Dark, where we're going to talk more about this voodoo child stuff with Maya. This has been a journey. I really didn't know what to expect. I like her more and more as we go along.
Mhm.
And I'm very curious about some of these other films.
You can see how she's just, I mean, I got electrified doing this research. She's just like, what's going to happen? Like, I kind of knew the story, but also just like, how does she get from there to there? Like, how does
from A
that
to B.
happen? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. And it's just following her instinct a lot of times is what she's doing. And having the courage to do that too. Like, not just like, oh, you know what, that would be kind of neat to go to Haiti someday, and maybe I could go down to Haiti and film some. It's like, no, we're gonna do it. We're gonna load up a bunch of luggage. I'm gonna get a Guggenheim fellowship for this, and then they don't know what I'm doing, but I just got a bunch of money, so we'll load up a boat and I'll go to this place I've never been to. And
there's a lot of bravery involved.
There really is. Yeah. Now, so as I said, she puts out these different things related to her experiences in Haiti. She puts out this book. She puts out a couple albums. There's supposed to be a 6-record compilation of Haitian music that didn't end up ever coming out, but I'm sure that's all recorded someplace. Some of the problem is doing high quality field recordings at this time is a little bit challenging, right? And she wasn't an expert in doing that either. So some of the quality of it wasn't as good as it might have been. The other problem is, the only thing that's kind of taking her away from this is there's money issues too. I know the Guggenheim Fellowship is quite prestigious, but when you look at the actual funding and you try to compare that to actually launching something like a film project, which is very expensive. It doesn't quite measure up. And so it's one thing to, I need to pay my rent for a year, but it's another to like, I need cameras and I need to hire people to carry it. And I need, all of these things. It's very challenging, right? So there's money issues. She also starts to have health issues. She has major surgery for an abdominal hemorrhage and peritonitis, which is a severe affection of the abdomen. I don't know where that came from, but in 1954, she had to have this major surgery. Some people say that she couldn't actually finish the film itself, which was her main priority, trying to make this film. Some people say she could not finish it because she had accidentally cursed it with dark magic. Okay, so now Sarah Keller in Incomplete Control makes the argument that it's not really even about completing a film at some point. I think it's relevant here to kind of pull in something that, and I'm not going to pretend that I know what Deleuze and Guattari are all about. All right. People who are on the internet, probably some people who are listening to it, this know Deleuze a lot better than I do. But one of the sort of theories that they worked out about art is that art isn't about creating a discrete product that you can package and sell, right? Art is about inventing means for rendering certain intensities of life visible. It's about rendering invisible forces visible, right? And so, was Maya able to complete a film? No. Was she able to somehow go to the other side and bring something back? I think there is an argument there that she did, right, with this book and just her general experience. I want to give you a quote from Maya about Vodou here. Quote, I agree in the forces of the universe of which the Vodou priest speaks, but other religions speak of these forces also. I do find the manner it operates in ritually, the interior miracle, if you will, is very valid. You see, the Haitians never ask whether you believe in Vodou. They say, do you do it? Right. So it's not, it's to them, it does have a dogmatic principle to it, but it's sort of like, well, did you try it? It's easy to dismiss this thing, but it's like, did you actually try it or not? Because if you didn't, then you don't really know what we're talking about, right?
I like that. I like that.
No, there is a certain thing. I mean, this is the thing, and it's not like it's unique among religions for this. There is this thing in the center of Vodou that's possession, and you can go into it and decide that it's not what they say it is, but it is like a thing you have to figure out for yourself what that is. If you're going to dismiss the religion, or you're going to say they think they're doing something, but it's something else, that's all fine. But this is a phenomenon that's happening at the center of the religion. We're going to talk more about it.
It would be like claiming to be a Christian, but to have never been baptized.
Something like that.
It doesn't work. That is the thing.
Right.
At the heart of it. Yeah. Across denominations. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can't, and I guess this is true of all religions, like if you can't dismiss them without coming to grips with what they see as being the center of them, right? Right, because otherwise you don't really know what you're talking about, right?
Right.
Now it's important too to center us where we're at time-wise in what is the relationship of American culture or Western culture to Haiti at this time. Because it's actually kind of an interesting time. Now we think of it as, I mean, Kevin, what do you think? What is Haiti to you right now?
Well, I mean, I've been on that island, but I've been on the DR side. Yeah. I mean, if I was to be candid without a filter, I think about extreme poverty. I think about the slave revolt, the sort of the one time.
After dark.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I think about the Clintons.
Mhm.
and maybe the NGO complex and how
Mm.
utterly corrupt all of that business is.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to help, but it doesn't ever seem to
Doesn't seem to
change or
ever
to
get there.
really, yeah,
Yeah.
reach them. So yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
afraid I don't know much more than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, and that's kind of what I want. I just wanted sort of a general sense. I don't know a whole lot about it modern day either, to be honest. I do know I read this thing interestingly. In 2010, there was an earthquake there that may have
Hmm.
killed 250,000 people, and I'd never
Yeah.
even heard of it.
Oh, I was aware there was an earthquake. I mean, that was when the Clinton Foundation and company
Okay.
got a ton of money, and then it just all kind of,
Oh my
what I
God.
heard is that it was sort of all kind of black
Right.
holed, or
Right.
most of it just got chewed up by administration. It's one of those cases where if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, you can go, oh, these greedy, but it could also just literally just be administrative bloat and corruption on all
Yeah.
sides, all
Yeah.
directions. Yeah.
Everybody's peeling off the top until it gets to the end and there's
And
nothing
there's just
left. Right.
nothing left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so in Maya's time, that wasn't quite what it was. I mean, there was the perception that it was sort of quote unquote savage, right? But it wasn't. I mean, at the right around this time, people like W.E.B. Du Bois and Breton and Capote, Truman Capote and John Dos Passos were visiting the country. There was a bit of a tourist attraction going on there, but it was sort of early day. It wasn't sure. It was like they were trying to turn it into a tourist thing, and it hadn't quite decided if it was going to be yet, right? There were photo shoots where New York socialites like went shopping in the markets in like expensive designer dresses, right? And things like this. And Les Baxter's famous Exotica album, Ritual of the Savage, came out in 1952, this is a year that Maya was there. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. This album, Ritual of the Savage, our friend Phil Ford from Weird Studies is a huge advocate. I don't want to say advocate. He's very interested in exotica as a genre. But this album launched exotica as a genre, right? That sort of Tropicana kind of like nightclub thing where you're gonna like dress up as a witch doctor and bang on a drum. It was a thing in the 50s, right? So all that was going
Right.
on
So
while
soon
Maya
it'll
was
be
there.
tiki bars and right.
Yeah,
Yeah. That kind of, I understand.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And so Maya Deren, she's in Haiti when all of that's what Haiti is at that time. And but she's like, I'm going out into the fringes. We're gonna go, we're gonna go talk to the gods. Um, Now in 1952 is when she meets this guy, Teiji Ito. Um, he's actually 18 years younger than her. He's a Japanese guy from a theatrical family who ran away to New York when he was about 15 years old. He was a dancer and a drummer and a composer who would have some success both off and on Broadway, mostly after Maya passed away. When he met her, he was 17 years old. Uh, by 1955, 3 years later, he was traveling with her to Haiti and studying under a master drummer in the Vodou tradition. Eventually, Maya and Ito would get married at sea in 1955. After she died in the 70s, he would score Meshes of the Afternoon. And then he and his fourth wife, he was also got married a lot of times, like Maya. He and his fourth wife would finish Maya's film, which was called Divine Horsemen, the Living Gods of Haiti. Um, they would kind of, and partially how they did this is instead of Maya's vision for what this film could be, we're going to somehow capture the forces of dance. They were like, let's just turn it into a documentary. She has all of this footage. She wrote this book that's very, very sharp and very insightful, and she saw a lot of things that nobody else saw. We'll just take her footage and turn it into a documentary, and we'll show various voodoo rituals. And it's good. It's a solid documentary. If you're interested in Haiti, if you're interested in voodoo, it's really good. It's about an hour long. Um, let's see. So, uh, yeah, let me just read. We're kind of rounding the horn here. Other than Haiti and the voodoo and stuff, she's got a few other things that she's working on. One is a film called Meditation on Violence, which is a great name, great title. The focus of Meditation on Violence is the dancer Chao Li Chi. He was a Chinese-born American actor and dancer. I'm just reading from Wiki about him, who worked extensively in American television, including roles in, interestingly enough, including roles in Big Trouble in Little China, The Joy Luck Club, Wedding Crashers, and The Prestige.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, those are
Right?
some big movies.
Yeah, right. But also like it feels like completely different times. Like it doesn't even feel like it could be the same person in a way, right? Um, and what this is about, he's dancing. It's following him dancing. He's sort of wearing just pants, and he's a very fit guy, right? He's a dancer, and he's got a bit of a martial arts training, and he it cycles from, at some point, at hard edits, like I think he jumps or he makes a sort of dance maneuver, hard edits, and then he has a sword, and then he's doing traditional Wu-Tang, I believe it's Wu-Tang sword motions, and then they run them same ones in reverse, right? So he does it, it gets to the end, and then the end is the beginning, and it kind of goes back, right? Basically the whole film goes backwards. So it's quite captivating to look at.
Wu-Tang is for the children.
Yeah. Quote from Maya Deren, Wu-Tang is for the children. I'm going to read you a little bit about this film from Sarah Keller's great In Complete Control. Quote, the film's openness works both in favor of its themes, how violence and action are related to one another, for instance, and its structure, which is circular, recursive, and in excess of a closed system. The film evolves out of this, quote, form as a whole, and that form is its point. Deren maps the formal ideas based on the notion of a curve describing traditional training movements of Wu-Tang and Shaolin schools of Chinese boxing. She charts this movement commencing with her performer executing steady and balanced movements, Wu-Tang, and then increasingly in intensity and speed, Shaolin, culminating with a peak of velocity and violence of motion, Sword of Shaolin. The third section employs slightly disorienting cuts to keep up with the pace, and finally, even more disorientingly, climaxes in the opposite of what one expects of moving pictures, stillness. Chao Li Chi jumps into the air, and Deren holds him suspended in air for a second or two before resuming his motion and allowing him to land. Deren explains, quote, the ultimate of an extreme becomes its opposite. Here, the ultimate of violence is paralysis. Okay, so that was her bag there on meditation and violence. Quite good. Quite interesting to look at. It's short. I can't remember how long. I think it's under 10 minutes. It's pretty interesting to look at. Another big project she worked on was called The Very Eye of Night, and this was probably her most ambitious film project other than the Vodou film. Again, reading from Sarah Keller's In Complete Control. March 1952, Deren began work on The Very Eye of Night. Very Eye takes dance as its subject, like many of her films. The project afforded Deren the opportunity to work with John Latouche, the Broadway lyricist and avant-garde sympathizer, as well as choreographer Anthony Tudor, with whom Deren had hoped to collaborate for some time. Former resident composer for the American Ballet Theater and head of faculty for the Metropolitan Opera Ballet School, Tudor arranged the choreography and managed the dancers. Again, he's a heavy in this world, right? Just as with Ensemble, another film she tried to make but didn't quite come off, the first shots of The Very Eye of Night feature a separate credit for Deren herself, that also is joined by credits listing personnel in a creative visual way. These credits depict an eye with an iris divided into two hemispheres, one light and one dark. Each successive image gives the names of the dancer actors who are credited alongside with a drawing of the character they play. Scrolling down a little bit. Oh, I'm going to skip that part. Basically, here's the part. Okay, here's the part. Each character is depicted at a slightly closer view in relation to the one that comes before it. First, Gemini, played by two male dancers, then four satellites of Uranus, Ariel, Titiana, Oberon, and Umbriel. And then Uranus and his female counterpart, Urania, are next, followed by Noctambulo, the somnambulist who has drifted in his sleep from one film to this one. So it's a very, like, you're starting to get almost into like psychedelia. Like the dancers are all wearing complete black, but then it's filmed in negative, and then they're superimposed on a screen of stars. It's a very cosmic, like,
wow.
Yeah,
I mean, if she had
it's far
lived
out there.
to see the music video, I
Right.
wonder what. Yeah, she could have crushed
She would
that.
have made a killer music video,
Do you
right?
remember when music videos mattered? Like when
Yeah, oh
they
yeah, yeah.
really mattered? Yeah, Bowie and all that stuff.
Right,
Oh, it's
right.
so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Couple other things she worked on. Um, she had this dance effort that would have become a film. Called she was working on called The Transformations of Medusa. She was working on that with Jean Erdman, who was the wife of Joseph Campbell. She was going to film the overture of The Magic Flute with choreographer Anthony Tudor. In 1956, Maya started the Creative Film Foundation with the idea that she would find means to getting funding for experimental film projects. This did kind of come off. She was unfortunately unable to give anybody money, but she started up like an award system for experimental films. And the benefit of that was a lot of these experimental filmmakers had no other way of getting any recognition, right? There's not it's hard to, I mean, we've said this a million times, but they didn't have the internet back then. You couldn't go on YouTube and find some experimental filmmaker's website. These things were hard to find,
You
right?
literally had to bring the can to the cinema
Right.
and put it in the reel
Yeah.
and show it to people.
Yeah. And so Maya was trying to figure out ways to sort of institutionalize it to some degree. And if she'd lived longer, maybe she would have had some success there, right? That would have been something she could have kind of retired into, perhaps. Um, she had this thing called Season of Strangers, which was really her last film project, which was started at this workshop in Woodstock. It was going to be like partially educational, but then she was going to sort of segue from educational into the workshop actually making a film. It's kind of interesting. I'll read a quick quote from Incomplete Control about this. The second part of the Seasons of Strangers would take place over 3 days of the first weekend, Friday through Sunday. Deren titled this segment of the workshop, quote, "Filming an image through the camera eye." The plan coincides with most of the footage that exists for the film. For the first 2 days, she planned to seek, quote, "patterns of movement across the screen, requiring rehearsal both for people and camera movement, as well as extensive lighting of the scene." For the last day, she hoped to film smaller groupings. Through this part of the workshop, Deren intended to undertake most of the logistical matters related to filming for the project, after which students could, quote, "pose questions on any phase of the day's activity." Her teaching style strategically incorporated a balance between practice and analysis/reflection. So she was trying to teach people how to make films like she made films, right? With the same sort of ethic and the same level of diligence. And I think she was often very dismissive. She knew all of the experimental filmmakers in Greenwich Village, and she was often very dismissive of their work. And I think what it boiled down to was like, you guys aren't taking this seriously enough. Like you're kind of just vibing. And really, what this requires is very deliberate devotion to the craft. And we're trying to figure out what that craft is. Okay, so we are getting there. Okay, we're almost there. Final years, Maya had this reputation in Greenwich Village and the art world, of course. But the truth is, as the 50s are winding down, she's kind of alienating most people. And partially this is due to the fact that she's so intense and she's so demanding. And you could be her best friend.
Sure.
You could be her best friend. And if you're like, "Maya, I'd like you to see this film I made." And if she didn't like it, she'd be basically tell you she didn't like it. Right. And that can be alienating for people. And some people can
Right.
handle it. Some people need to be cultivated a little bit. Right.
Yeah, the charm of that can wear off too when a relationship isn't reciprocal over
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
And it's always the Maya show
Yeah.
all the time.
And I think that's a big
That can
factor in
get
this
a
too.
little tiresome. Yeah,
Hmm.
I've been on both
Hmm.
sides of that.
Yeah.
You gotta
Yeah.
it's always a negotiation.
It
Yeah.
it for sure is. Now, the other thing, okay, so one of her friends who talked about her quite a bit is this guy, Stanley Breakage. He's a guy who's a well-known experimental filmmaker, or was a well-known experimental filmmaker. You know, he's a guy who kind of he would paint right on the celluloid. And so sort of one of these guys who's the forerunner of sort of psychedelic film, right? Because he would paint and then you run the film, and it's a very interesting and unusual visual spectacle. Became notable for films like the Dog Star Man series, Mothlight, and some others. He was good friends with Maya and lived with her for a while. Some other friends of hers in the late 50s were this guy Willard Moss, Jonas Mekas, Joseph Cornell, John Cage. So she still had friends around, but she was, like I said, she was kind of alienating them. Now, the thing is, even though she's back in New York and the last time she visits Haiti is in 1955, she still takes voodoo very seriously.
Whoa.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
And in fact, in 1955 or 1956, she's invited by the actor Jeffrey Holder to preside over his wedding. And Jeffrey Holder is this, at the time, he's this rising Trinidadian theatrical actor. He'd done really well on Broadway on Truman Capote and Harold Arlen's musical House of Flowers. He'd been in that. And then he'd much later be known as Baron Samedi in the Bond film Live and Let Die. He stars as like the voodoo villain in that 70s Bond film.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
that's a big career if you get to be a Bond villain.
Yeah, for sure.
Heavy duty.
It started on Broadway, right?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and so he was getting married, and they wanted Maya to come. Interestingly enough, he's from Trinidad. The woman he's marrying is she was born in California, but her parents were New Orleans Creole, and they bring Maya in to make their wedding more authentically voodoo. Right. It's just interesting, right? They're going to bring this Russian immigrant in to make your thing more authentic.
Yeah, this like Jewish gal, but she did it for, wow.
She's for real.
Yeah,
right?
she's got cred.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's not a LARP.
Right. It's not.
Maya.
No, maybe it started as, she was for real now. She's the real deal. Now she's supposed to preside over this wedding. And then Stan Breakage, the guy I mentioned before, who did the very experimental films, he came to the wedding. He was supposed to be like I think he was just going to photograph the wedding. I don't know that there was like going to be an artsy component to it. The other thing to remember is all these people are hard up for money for the most part. And so, you're a serious artist, but like if somebody's like, hey, here's, a few $100, you want to come shoot my wedding? Yes, I will come do that.
Sure.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, Maya had been preparing all of this stuff to make it an authentic Haitian voodoo kind of wedding. And they had decided it was sort of too much. And they'd said, Maya, like, thanks, but like, how about you just go kind of hang out in the house? We got it from here. And Maya, at this point, she had been in a Papa Loco trance. This is according to Stan Breakage. And Papa Loco is the god of ritual. And Papa Loco doesn't want to just be dismissed. He's not going to say, this is too much, right? And so Maya flies into what Stan Breakage calls a holy rage. And he claims that she was in the kitchen snarling and growling and picked up a refrigerator and threw it across the room.
Cool. That is again, wow.
Right?
And it's metal.
So
crazy, she's just 5'2", inhabited by the spirit of Papa Loco. Papa Loco, that's a good metal.
It is a good
metal band. Yeah, they're opening for Sepultura.
Right. Yeah. For sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And crunchy, heavy. Yeah.
Throws a refrigerator across the room. And then also at this event, Stan Breakage, he's supposed to be taking the photographs. And so Maya wants to bless him, give him the Papa Loco blessing. And the Papa Loco blessing, this is what it included when Maya did it anyway. You pour rum on the person and then set it on fire.
Nice. Cool.
So Stan Breakage is in like a suit and he's on fire all of a sudden. He's trying to put himself out.
In contrast to the traditional American Four Loco. Right. Blessing, where you pour Four Loco on someone
down your throat,
and set it on fire.
Right. Yeah, it's so crazy.
They're same but different.
Similar.
Yeah. Similar.
Oh man. So Breakage
Uh,
has these great stories about her. One he says is he showed up, she had some event that she needed envelopes. She needed some help stuffing envelopes or something, right? Because even though she gave up socialism and communism, she's still gonna like organize. And Stan Breakage was supposed to uh come and help her out, and he shows up really late, and Maya put a curse on him, and he claims he got very, very ill, like almost dying ill, and sort of pulled out of it at the last minute, and that was Maya's curse on him. And he had this to say about her. uh that's the two sides of Maya, and I saw them both. I benefited and suffered from them. People that want to either make her one or the another thing or any diminutive thing are not understanding, one, the beautiful complexity of this woman, and two, they are not understanding artists at all. Uh yeah, really interesting. Okay. Now,
I just said fair enough. That is
yes.
heavy. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is a
yeah.
turn for her that I didn't quite expect. I didn't quite expect her to be this troubled somehow.
Yeah.
But I guess after the experience of, she's still kind of in relative poverty too, isn't she? She doesn't
Oh
have any
yeah.
money.
There's
Okay.
no money. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
not even
no
family
money.
money, or it's
Mm-mm.
just gone.
The family money ran out a long time ago.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Right.
Now, um,
Hmm.
between that wedding, excuse me, in 1955, and then her death.
How do you go and become a voodoo priestess
Mhm,
and then come back to New York and get anything remotely like a normie job?
right?
Or even like
Right.
set up a studio and like make commercial films. Like she's not gonna go over to Madison Avenue and find Don Draper
Right.
and go sit in a box and be a creative.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, from her perspective, she sort of saw the other side, man. Like,
Yeah.
whether she did or not, like, that's her
Hmm.
perspective. Now, between that wedding and her death, we talked about some of her other projects, right? The very eye of night, and the season of strangers, and all of these things. Nothing really. Very eye of night she did manage to finish that, but it had all kinds of financial problems. An investor backed out and all kinds of things. Um, but uh, by 1961, she's still living in Greenwich Village, and there's no money. Like, she would go to friends and just ask them if they could feed her for the day, right? If they had any food in their fridge, right? She's at that level. Um, she's a starving artist in her 40s, and that's a little different than being a starving artist in your 20s. Um, she's
And
with
single, or is she
No,
married at this point? She's married to
she's
this
with
Ito
this
guy.
Japanese guy, Ito. They're still married.
Oof.
They're married right up until the end. But
And
but
he's
he's
not earning.
not really. I mean, I don't know what his citizenship status was, and he would have a pretty successful career later. But I mean, I mean, 19, he's still like in his mid 20s at this point,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, right. Of course, he's so
Yeah,
much junior to
he's a
her.
young guy,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
So
That is messy and unpleasant.
yeah.
Yeah. The shine kind of comes off the romance of artistic poverty around the time you turn 30.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so in 1961, she becomes deathly ill. And
Mm.
October 12th, she falls into something like a coma.
Crowley-ness.
Yeah, is that right? Oh yeah. Okay.
Mm.
October 12th. Um
Mm.
uh Ito believed that she wouldn't die because Friday the 13th was the next day, and then it's some kind of like inversion of luck. It would end up being her good luck that she would come out of this, right? And it was just wishful
Mm.
thinking.
Mm.
He believed he was at this point, they thought he was due some inheritance, but they were having legal trouble getting it. I don't know if this had to do with, Japan to America. I don't really understand it. But apparently they were both very upset at this time because he was supposed to be getting some money and they couldn't get their hands on it. He kind of thought that she was so upset about this that it made her ill, right?
Oh no.
Um,
Oh.
yeah. Now, others said she was upset because of dealings with an investor. I mean, it's a very stressful situation, right? Trying to get these films made, and she's this, powerhouse person who, the luck is kind of running out now.
Mm.
Um, the official story is that she'd become so malnourished, possibly um, exacerbated by years of using Dr. Feelgood's quote creative medicine,
Mm.
that she had a cerebral hemorrhage.
Mm.
Whatever the case, she died Friday the 13th, October of 1961, in the hospital with Ito and her mother Marie near at hand. Now, to finish this story, I want to give you one more Stan Breakage quote. Quote, she had to be these many things, Maya obviously, had to be these many things to be the creative person that she was, to do these things in cinema that had never been done before. In fact, you could say leaving the word cinema out of it, to effect rituals in moving vision that had never been done before. And it took all these powers. And alas, at some point, finally, when an artist has powers like these, if those powers get outside of the work process, they can kill you. And I fervently believe that is what killed Maya at 44 years old. It was because somehow the powers of Vodou got outside of the work process, and partially because she didn't get the money to finish her last film. So that's how Stan thought about it.
Whoa.
Died. Ito took her ashes and spread them at Mount Fuji in Japan. And yeah, that's the story of Maya Deren. 1961, died at age 44, lived about 10 lifetimes in that time frame.
Just a
Yeah.
huge, interesting life.
Right?
And another Art of Darkness core episode in the can.
Boom.
Bam. Cinematic, dramatic, exciting, interesting. I learned a lot. I'm
Good.
going to have to go down the Maya Deren.
Yeah, check them out. Check out At Land. If you're gonna watch one of them, in my opinion, it's At Land.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
it's so curious too, because it seems to me you could probably watch all of her films in 2 hours
yeah,
under.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And get a taste for what she's about. Very,
yeah.
very interesting how influential she was. And even just glancing at that one film,
Mhm.
Mesh of the Afternoon,
Meshes of the Afternoon. Yeah.
Meshes of the Afternoon, just picking up how, yes, of course, you could see the influence on Lynch. And if you're a Lynch
Mhm.
stan like I am, and I think
Yeah.
you are, Brad, you owe it
Mhm.
to yourself at least to watch a couple of these.
Yeah, I think so.
Nicely done.
Yeah. Thanks,
Well
man.
done.
Yeah,
And if
she's a
she's
fascinating
alive
story.
today, Brad, what do
Oh,
you think she's doing?
she never sold out, I'll tell you that. She 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 might have given up on film. I think she would eventually decided that what her artistic expression was really going to be wasn't, like Stan Breakage says at the end there. It's not so much about making a film, making a specific thing that she can give to you, but really wrestling with invisible forces in some way,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Mm-hmm.
think she may not have put it in those terms. I think was what her artistic thesis ended up being, right? She took poetry, she tried to be a poet, and she realized she couldn't wrestle with those forces and those images quite adequately with that. So she went to
Mm.
cinema and she found some success there. But then eventually she had to go straight into this ritual, this very,
Yeah.
very outside for her, from her cultural lineage, a very strange and exotic ritual process, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think her following that track would have just continued. I mean, she might be like running ayahuasca ceremonies. I don't really know, you know.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, she seems like she might have been somebody who would possibly evolve away from art, away
Mm-hmm.
from filmmaking. Like I've kind
Yeah.
of done it. One of these people who makes their 10 short
Yeah.
films, influences the rest of cinematic history, but moves upstate.
Yeah.
And she's an interesting one because we can sort of speculate what she would have maybe done in the third act of her life, because she
She
died
didn't have one. Yeah.
right in the middle of it. I mean, if we try to put her today into this landscape, she was so interested in form and cutting edge form. I wonder if she would be drawn to something other than cinema. Like, what is today's cinema? Would it be a game? Would it
Yeah.
be would she just be messing around with a TikTok channel, or would she still be trying to do something new with cinema? Hard to say.
Yeah. She'd be doing something though. I mean, I don't think that engine ever really quits.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to come back here now after a short break for our Patreon subscribers. We just got another subscriber while we were recording. I always love to see that. That's a fun coincidence. You put it out there into the ether. Yeah. And you never know. Somebody might subscribe. Please do. You get all the After Dark episodes. There are bonus episodes tagged on to every single episode we do. We do quarterly recaps. We do a book club. Even if you can't be present in the Zoom for the book club, we record it. So just tons of extra stuff for people who care to check out. $5 a month minimum to support the pod. We hope you will, and we hope you enjoyed this. And Brad, I know what this feels like, by the way. There's a quality of like kind of relief, and also, well, we're not quite done. No. We're going to talk more about Vodou, but the heavy lifting is done.
Yes. Yeah. It's a relief, and and it's obsessive prep towards the end, especially. It starts to get kind of obsessive, and then I'm like, I really enjoyed that, but I don't have to think about Maya Deren for a little while.
Right, you can kind of put it away, and I'm staring at my looming stack of Hemingway books. I'm actually gonna show off real quick here for the This is my stack. If you're not following us on YouTube, please do youtube.com/@artofdarkpod. Brad, describe this to people who are not on YouTube.
It basically occupies the entire screen with, I'm going to guess without counting, 9 or 10 different volumes of Hemingway and Hemingway associated literature. And Kevin's going to read every page of that by...
the honest to God, I already have. I've read all of this because I was working on a play about Hemingway for years. So anyway, Hemingway episode is going to be a certified banger.
I can't
Brad
wait.
Just delivered one for us. Maya Deren, very interesting, very exciting. On the After Dark for Patreon, we're going to talk about her Vodou practice. We're going to talk about more about this school that was a school for idiots, but then was for the feeble-minded, and then just was a school. That's going to be fun. Yeah. What else are we going to talk about, Brad?
Well, I want to give people a sort of a primer on what Vodou is. So it's just going to be a little like, hopefully you'll walk away and have a slightly better understanding of it's not just voodoo dolls and people, doing. I want you to come away without a caricature of what it is and have a sense of what it actually is. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to be polishing my monocle.
Excellent.
Illuminati confirmed.
Ding. Ding.